A few months ago, I traveled to the Polish border with the Ukraine, where a constant stream of Ukrainian refugees were arriving, having had their lives totally uprooted. They mostly had been on foot for several days, including carrying all of their belongings and in lots of cases young children as well. They traveled an average of 25 miles, including a 3-mile walk just from the train station next to the border. After arriving in Poland, these refugees had walked down this narrow path, and on each side of the path, there were volunteers like myself trying to offer them anything they might need in that moment. So first and foremost, they were provided with medical care, but there were also volunteers offering food and drink, blankets, SIM cards, and much more. The first face greeting these refugees was a young girl called Anna, and I quickly noticed that she'd carefully positioned herself to make sure that she was the first face they would be greeted with. She stuck out to me because she spoke Ukrainian, which was not the case for a lot of these volunteers who were actually struggling to communicate with the refugees coming across the border. So I approached Anna and I asked her her story. Anna herself had arrived as a refugee a month earlier with her mother, who was a therapist, and the two of them had decided that instead of waiting and taking refuge until the opportunity arose that they could return home, they would actually turn back to the border. They decided that they needed to help the continuing flow of refugees who were following behind them. It was an amazing thing for me to witness. Anna's presence was particularly vital in this unique situation because these refugees, they finally found safety. They finally were free from oppression. And yet what did they find? What did their freedom look like? Their freedom was the moment that they became strangers in a strange land. It was only when they crossed into Poland, only when they were then safe, that was the moment that they did not understand the culture around them, that they could not communicate with all of these different volunteers or the Polish locals. They had their own language, they had their own culture. And the moment they were free from oppression, suddenly they'd lost all of that. Suddenly they were now strangers in a strange land. That was what freedom from oppression looked like for them. And yet, there was one exception. One segment of the Ukrainian population did not have that reality. For them, the moment they left oppression, the moment they got out of the Ukraine, they suddenly had somewhere to go. They had a destination in mind. And I'm talking, of course, about the Ukrainian Jews, because they had somewhere to go. They had Israel. It's the reverse of the status quo throughout Jewish history. You have to go back 3,334 years for the last time that Jews escaped oppression, but had somewhere to go, had a destination in mind, and that destination, again, was Israel. And I'm talking, of course, about when the Jews left Egypt. Yes, the Torah tells us this week that we need to empathize with refugees, because we were once slaves in Egypt. We were once oppressed. We were once strangers in a strange land. And yet freedom from that oppression can take a variety of forms. We celebrate on Seder night the miracle that we were able to leave Egypt, but I think we forget the second part of that miracle. Yes, the first stage is that we were able to leave. The second stage is that we then had somewhere to go. For so much of our history, that has not been the case. We've escaped oppression, only to then become strangers in a strange land, yet again in a new country, in exile. Moshe reminds the Jewish people that us having somewhere to go after escaping oppression, us having a destination as we travel through the wilderness, is as much a part of the miracle as us leaving Egypt in the first place. And as I witnessed firsthand on the Ukrainian border, that is something for us as modern day Jews to never take for granted. Shabbat Shalom.